This practice is an inversion of the first law of behavior change rather than make it obvious. You can make it invisible. I am often surprised by how effective simple changes like these can be remove a single cue and the entire habit often fades away. Self control is a short term strategy, not a long term one. You may be able to resist temptation once or twice, but it's unlikely you can muster the willpower to override your desire every time. Instead of summoning a new dose of willpower whenever you want to do the right thing, your energy would be better spent optimizing your environment. This is a secret to self control. Make the cues of your good habit obvious and the cues of your bad habit invisible. Chapter summary. The inversion of first law of behavior change is make it invisible. Once a habit is formed, it is unlikely to be forgotten. People with high self control tend to spend less time in tempting situations. It's easier to avoid temptation than resist it. One of the most practical way to eliminate a bad habit is to reduce exposure of the cue that cause it. Self-control is a short-term strategy, not a long-term one. How to create a good habit? The first law, make it obvious. 1.1, fill out the habit score. Write down your current habit to become aware of them. 1.2, use implementation intention. I will behavior at time and location. 1.3, use habit stacking after current habit. I will new habit. 1.4, design your environment, make your cues of good habit obvious and visible. The second law, make it attractive. The third law, make it easy. The fourth law, make it satisfying. How to break a bad habit? Inversion of a first law, make it invisible. 1.5, reduce exposure. Remove the cues of your bad habit from your environment. Inversion of second law, make it unattractive. Inversion of third law, make it difficult. Inversion of fourth law, make it unsatisfying. The second law, make it unattractive. The second law, make it attractive. How to make a habit irresistible. In the 1940s, a Dutch scientist named Nico Tinbergen performed a series of experiments that transform our understanding of what motivates us. Tinbergen, who eventually won a Nobel Prize for his work, was investigating herring gulls and the gray and the white birds often seen flying along the seashore of North America. Adult herring gulls have a small red dots on their beak, and Timbergen noticed that newly hatched chicks would peck this spot whenever they wanted food. To begin one experiment, he created a collection of fake cardboard bricks, just a heat without a body. When the parents had flown away, he went over to the nest and offered these dummy beaks to the chicks. The beaks were obvious fakes, and he assumed the baby birds would reject them altogether. However, when the tiny girls saw the red spot on the cardboard beak, they pecked away just as if it were attached to their own mother. They had a clear preference for those red spots as if they had been genetically programmed at birth. Soon Timbergen discovered that the bigger the red spot, the faster the chick peck. Eventually, he created a beak with three large red dots on it. When he placed it over the next, the baby bird went crazy with delight. They peck at the little red patch as if it was the greatest beak they have ever seen. Timbergen and his colleagues discovered similar behavior in other animals. For example, the gray lag goose is a ground nesting bird. Occasionally, as the mother moves around on the nest, one of the eggs will roll out and settle on the grass nearby. Whenever this happens, the goose will waddle over to the egg and use its beak and neck to pull it back into the nest. Timbergen discovered that the goose will pull any nearby round object, such as a billiard ball or a light bulb, back into the nest. The bigger the object, the greater their response. One goose even made a tremendous effort to roll a volleyball back and sit it on the top. Like the baby girl automatically packing at red dots, the gray leg goose was following an incen- incentive rule. When I see a round object nearby, I must roll it back into the nest. The bigger the round object, the harder I should try to get it. It's like the brain of each animal is preloaded with certain rules for behavior, and when it comes across an exaggerated version of that rule, it's light up like a Christmas tree. Scientists refer to these exaggerated cues as supernormal stimuli. A supernormal stimulus is a heightened version of reality, like a beak with three red dots or an egg the size of a volleyball, and it elicits a strong response than usual. Humans are also prone to fall for exaggerated versions of reality. Junk foods, for example, drives our reward system into a frenzy. After spending hundreds of thousands of years of hunting and foraging for food in the wild, the human brain was evolved to place a high value on salt, sugar, and fat. Such food are often calorie dense, and they were quite rare when our ancient ancestors were roaming the savannah. When you don't know where your next meal is coming from, eating as much as possible is an excellent strategy for survival. Today, however, we live in a calorie rich environment. Food is abundant, but your brain continues to crave it like it is scarce. Placing a high value on salt, sugar, and fat is no longer advantageous to our health, but the craving persists because the brain reward centers have not changed for approximately 50,000 years. The modern food industry relies on stretching our Paleolithic instinct beyond their evolutionary purpose. A primary goal of a food science is to create products that are more attractive to consumer. Nearly every food in a bag, box, or jar has been enhanced in some way, if only with additional flavoring. Companies spend millions of dollars to discover the most satisfying level of crunch in a potato chip or the perfect amount of fizz in the soda. Entire departments are dedicated to optimize how a product feels in your mouth, a quality known as orosensation. French fries, for example, are a potent combination, golden brown and crunchy on the outside, light and smooth on the inside. Other processed foods enhance dynamic contrast, which refers to item with a combination of sensation like crunchy and creamy. Imagine the gooiness of melted cheese on top of a crispy pizza crust, or the crunch of an Oreo cookie combined with its smooth center. With natural unprocessed food, you tend to experience the same sensation over and over. How's that sensation bite of kale taste? After a few minutes, your brain loses interest and you begin to feel full. But foods that are high in dynamic contrast keep the experience novel and interesting, encouraging you to eat more. Ultimately, such strategies enable food scientists to find the bliss point for each product, the precise combination of salt, sugar, and fat that excite your brain and keeps you coming back for more. The result, of course, is that you overeat because hyperpalatable foods are more attractive to the human brain, as Stephen Goynat, a neuroscientist who specializes in eating behavior and obesity, say. We've gotten too good at pushing our own buttons. The modern food industry and overeating habit it has spawned is just one example of the second law of behavior change. Make it attractive. The more attractive an opportunity is, the more likely it is to be more habit forming. Look around, society is filled with highly engineering versions of reality that are more attractive than the world our ancestors evolved in. A store features mannequins with exaggerated hips and breasts to sell clothes. Social media delivers more likes and praise in a few minutes than we could ever get in the office or at home. Online porn Online porn slices together stimulating scenes at a rate that would be impossible to replicate in real life. Advertisements are created with a combination of ideal lighting, professional makeup, and are created with a combination of ideal lighting, professional makeup, and Photoshop edits. Even the model doesn't look like the person in the final image. These are the supernormal stimuli of our modern world. They exaggerated features that are naturally attractive to us, and our instincts go wild as a result, driving us into excessive shopping habits, social media habits, porn habits, eating habits, and many others. If history serve as a guide, the opportunities of a future will be more attractive than those of today. The trend is for reward to become more concentrated and a stimuli to become more enticing. Junk food is a more concentrated form of calories than natural food. Hard liquor is a more concentrated form of alcohol than beer. Video games are a more concentrated form of play than board games. Compared to nature, these pleasure pack experiences are hard to resist. We have the brain of our ancestors, but temptation they never had to face. If you wanted to increase the odds that a behavior will occur, they then you need to make it attractive. Thought out our decision of the second law, our goal is to learn how to make our habits irresistible. While it is not possible to transform every habit into a supernormal stimulus, we can make any habit more enticing. To do this, we must start by understanding what a craving is and how it works. We begin by examining a biological signature that all habits share, the dopamine spike, the dopamine driving feedback loop. Scientists can track the precise movement a craving occurs by measuring a neurotransmitter called dopamine. The importance of dopamine became apparent in 1954 when the neuroscientists James Olds and Peter Miller ran an experiment that reveals the neurological process behind cravings and desire. By implementing electrodes in the brains of rats, the researchers blocked the release of dopamine to surprise the scientists. The rats lost all will to live. They couldn't eat, they wouldn't have sex, they didn't crave anything. Within a few days, the animal died of thirst. In follow up studies, other scientists have inhibited the dopamine releasing part of the brain, but this time they squirted little droplets of sugar into the mouth of a dopamine depleted rats. Their little their little red faces lit up with pleasure grins from the tasty substance. Even though dopamine was blocked, they liked the sugar just as much as before. They they just didn't want it anymore. The ability to experience pleasure remained, but without dopamine, desire died. Without desire, action stopped. When other researchers reversed this process and flooded the reward system of the brain with dopamine, animals perform habits at breakneck speed. In one study, mice receive a powerful hit of dopamine each time they poke their nose in a box. Within minutes, the mice develop a craving so strong they begin poking their nose into the box 800 times per hour. Humans are not so different. The average slot machine players will spin the wheel 600 times per hour. Habits are dopamine driving feedback loop. Every behavior that is highly habit forming, taking drugs, eating junk food, playing video games, browsing social media is associated with higher levels of dopamine. The same can be said for our most basic habitual behavior like eating food, drinking water, having sex, interacting socially. For years, scientists assumed dopamine was all about pleasure, but now we know it plays a central role in many neurological processes, including motivation, learning, memory, punishment, and aversion and voluntary movement. When it comes to habit, the key takeaway is this: dopamine is released not only when you experience pleasure, but also when you anticipated it. Gambling addicts have a dopamine spike right before they place a bet, not after they win. Cocaine addicts get a surge of dopamine when they see the powder, not after they take it. Whenever you predict that an opportunity will be rewarding, your level of dopamine spike in anticipation. And whenever dopamine rises, so does your motivation to act. It is the anticipation of a reward, not the fulfillment of it, that get that that get us to take action. Interest, Interestingly, the reward system that is activated in the brain when you receive a reward in the same system that is activated when you anticipate a reward. This is one reason the anticipation of an experience can often feel better than the attainment of it. As a child, thinking about Christmas morning can be better than opening the gift. As a adult, daydreaming about an upcoming vacation can be more enjoyable than actually being on vacation. Scientists refer to this as the difference between wanting and liking. The dopamine spike. Cue craving is response reward. A, B, C, D. Figure 9. Before a habit is learned, A. Dopamine is released when the reward is experienced for the first time. The next time around, B. Dopamine arises before taking action. Immediately after a cue is recognized, this spike leads to feeling of desire and a craving to take action whenever the cue is spotted. Once a habit is learned, dopamine will not rise when a reward is experienced because you already expect the reward. However, if you see a cue and expect a reward but do not get one, then dopamine will drop in disappointment. C. The sensitivity of the dopamine response can clearly be seen when a reward is provided late. D. First, the cue is identified and dopamine rises as a craving builds. Next, the response is taken, but the reward does not come as quickly as expected, and dopamine begins to drop. Finally, when the reward comes a little later than you had hope, dopamine spike against. It is as if the brain is saying, see, I knew I was right. Don't forget to repeat this action next time. Your brain has far more neural circuitry allocated for wanting rewards than for liking them. The wanting centers in the brain are large: the brain stem, the nucleus accumbens, the ventral tegmental area, the dorsal stratum, the amygdala, the portion of prefrontal cortex. By comparison, the liking centers of the brain are much smaller. They are often referred to as hedonic hotspot and are distributed like tiny islands throughout the brain. For instance, researchers have found that 100% of the nucleus accumbens is activated during wanting. Meanwhile, only 10% of the structure is activated during liking.